So welcome everybody. My name's Kevin, and we're going to talk for a brief period about the 2022 NVAR form or contract changes. Barb, will you make sure everybody's muted but me? So twice a year, NVAR, the forms that we use, they update their forms, and then there's changes, and it's important that we know these. So some of these appear to be administrative in manner, but they actually have some real biting things to them that it's important that we know. So when we jump into the beginning here, in the opening paragraph removed any reference to the cooperating brokerage representing the seller, as sub-agency is no longer permitted in Virginia. So you can look here and you can see in the old, I'm sorry, that was the wrong one. You can look and see, it used to say that whether the buyer agency represented the buyer or the seller. Well, we used to have sub-agency in Virginia. And for those of you that don't recognize the term, because it hadn't been used in a long time, in sub-agency, when you drove around with a buyer and you showed them all those homes, you really weren't working for the buyer. You were working for the seller of every home that you showed, and you were a sub-agent of the listing agent. This is no longer permitted in Virginia, as agency must be disclosed to each party. So if you were, for instance, an agent representing the seller, you disclose to the seller, and an agent representing the buyer, you disclose to the buyer. But if you were trying to represent both, it would be dual agency. So sub-agency has been removed. So that block has been removed. On paragraph 2 under financing, it was really reformatted just to make it a lot more clear and easier to accommodate cash offers. So when you look up here in the section where it says old, you can see how it was laid out. And when it's laid out in the new section, it's a little different. And down here at the bottom is the big meat of this: seller subsidy to buyer. So a lot of us have had that situation where it's 20 minutes before closing and the seller calls and says, "What do you mean I'm paying for the buyer's closing costs? I thought that meant they were paying for mine." And buyers, as we know, really clients, don't really hear what they say. They hear what they think is important to them. So this was cleared up a lot. Seller subsidy to buyer. Seller's net is reduced by. So it's very clear where that credit is going and who's benefiting from it. And as always, we notice here on the side, you have an option to put in a dollar amount or a percentage amount. And the nice part about the percentage amount is if you're going back and forth on a counter situation, if you just fill out the percentage part, it floats with any price change. If you put in a dollar amount, every time you change that price on a contract, you've got to remember to go in and change it everywhere else because it's affected. The percentage really helps that out. But again, the important meat here is the seller subsidy means the seller's net is reduced by. Very important there. Now, in the old paragraph, it said seller agrees to comply with reasonable lender requirements. That's been removed as it was deemed redundant. It's always been in the contract in paragraph 20, where it says seller will sign such affidavits, lien waivers, tax certifications, and other documents that may be required by the lender. So in this instance, what they were doing was just removing a redundancy, which anything that makes the contract shorter, in my mind, is always better. So that sentence was just taken out as it's already included in paragraph 20. Major changes to access to the property. So this addresses who is allowed in the house and under what circumstances, and it also forces party to address access issues at the time of ratification. So in the old paragraph, in the old contract, we can see it said seller provide buyer, broker, inspectors representing buyer, and appraisers reasonable access to the property. Now access is addressed in 4 following areas of the contract. And as we'll see here, the appraisal, contingency, and access. We have an appraisal. The contract is or is not contingent on the appraisal. Okay. Now let's say it's not contingent on the appraisal. Let's say this is one of those situations where the buyer is waiving the appraisal. Okay. Well, often the challenge we had was they said, oh, I'm waiving the appraisal, but I still want to get one. No, we're going to address that right now. If it has been, if the contract is not contingent on financing or appraisal, the seller is stating upfront whether they will or will not provide appraisers reasonable access. So again, if the buyer is waiving the appraiser, we are addressing in paragraph F upfront whether or not the seller will or will not allow the appraiser in the property. It also clarifies that if there is an appraisal, that the appraiser is going to be allowed to come into the house. Now, property maintenance and condition. Here's another big one, big change, all new stuff, okay? So if it is contingent on a home inspection, seller will provide buyer, broker, and inspectors reasonable access to the property, okay? If it is not contingent on the home inspection or other inspections, seller will not provide access. So again, here is the situation. Oh, I'm a buyer. I'm waiving my home inspection. Oh, but wait a minute. I still want to have the inspector come with me. Whoa, 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 whoa. Hold the phone, Joe. We're addressing this right now. If it is not contingent on an inspection, we are not providing access to an inspector for the purposes of conducting inspections, except for walkthrough. Okay, so walkthrough, they could still have somebody there. But during the home inspection contingency time, we're saying, no, you've waived the right to do an inspection. You can't just bring an inspector in unless the seller has checked this box that will provide an inspector and you can put in actual dates. So if somebody waived their home inspection, they could say, okay, I'm not going to make it contingent on a home inspection. On the other hand, between the 11th and the 15th, I would like to allow an inspector into the house. So that can be addressed up front. But remember, regardless at the bottom here, regardless of whether this contract is contingent upon a home inspection or other inspections, the seller is still providing the broker and the buyer reasonable access to make walkthrough inspections within 7 days prior to settlement. Now, this is an important thing to remember. If you have a seller that has agreed to make repairs, remember that in the old world, we sort of always said, well, the repairs must be completed and receipts provided by closing. Remember that repairs must be completed prior to final walkthrough, and final walkthrough can be completed up to 7 days prior to settlement. So if I am a buyer and I want out of a contract and the seller has agreed to make repairs, I'm just going to schedule my walkthrough 7 days prior. I'm going to go in, repairs aren't done, buyer's getting out of the contract. So it's really on us as listing agents to make sure, Mr. or Mrs. Seller, 3 things. You need to do these repairs and you need to get them done within 7 days of closing. Prior to 7 days to closing, you need to have them done by a licensed contractor, licensed to do the type of work being performed, and you need to provide receipts unless otherwise agreed to. So very important to protect our sellers. I can't imagine having to make the call to my seller, hey, the buyer's walking because I told you you could have the repairs done by closing, when actually the contract says you have to have them done prior to final walkthrough. Barbara, I see chats. Are you watching? Oh, okay.
Yes, I will take a look at them.
Okay, thanks.
I'm taking attendance
All
right now, but yes.
Okay, sorry. We're good. Okay, so also in the home inspection paragraph 10, if it is contingent on a home inspection, it's clarified to say broker, buyer, and inspectors. Previously, it did not reference the broker. So now it references the broker, which the broker speaks to the brokerage. So it would be any agent from the brokerage. It also speaks to there can be multiple inspections during the time period. And The problem was that if we didn't speak to multiple inspections, home inspectors who clearly had access were dropping off a radon box as part of the contract, but then they had to come back and we need to make sure that that is included in the term of reasonable access. Now, was that allowed under the contract? That needs to be clarified. Okay, again, for the purposes of the home inspection contingency, this inspection does not include radon testing, well and septic inspection unless otherwise agreed to by separate clause or addendum. So that home inspection addendum only speaks to the home inspection unless A, the radon box is checked, the radon is checked. If that radon section of that addendum is not checked, the buyer does not have the right to do a radon test. Okay. And as always, well testing, well inspections, and septic inspection are agreed by a separate clause or addendum. So meaning that you can't just say a home inspection addendum, I'm going to do that. Oh, by the way, I'm going to go ahead and do a septic inspection, even though I don't have a septic inspection contingency. You need that contingency in order for the buyer to, per the contract, have the right to do that. Home inspection paragraph, again, if not checked, parties can negotiate a time frame for the buyers. Very important. And I would say that it's very important, as with any contract, if this is not going to be applicable, these dates, okay, make sure you draw a line through those blank spaces. Blank spaces on a contract lead to ambiguity, and ambiguity leads to chaos and anarchy. People go, well, I thought. So if you're not going to be using this paragraph, the best answer is to just put a line through before and ending on and after and ending on. So there's no question that this paragraph is not in play. And again, one of the issues that the reason this was clarified was still trying to deal with that old home inspection for informational purposes only, a statement that just drives me crazy when agents write that in there, because it's ambiguous. We write that in there, but what does it mean? Does it mean that, hey, I'm going to do a home inspection and I promise not to ask for inspections? Or does it mean I'm going to do a home inspection and I'm waiving my right to void? It doesn't really state what the sentence says. So we should never write that in there. And these changes were put in to eliminate the need for agents to think that they need to write that in there. Walkthrough, again, regardless of whether the contract is contingent on a home inspection, the seller will provide broker and buyer reasonable access to the property. This was moved from the old access paragraph to a new paragraph 10, and it clearly addresses walkthrough inspections, still plural. You can have an inspection or inspections, and the old paragraph did not define that a buyer's representative, the broker, had access. So here it says buyer and broker have access at the walkthrough. Only buyer and broker, not contractors or inspectors unless otherwise agreed to. Now, the home inspection contingency removal addendum, there was a new sentence added. Remember that if the seller agrees to make any repairs in this addendum, seller will provide broker, buyer, and licensed, if applicable, professional insured inspectors retained by the buyer to make final walkthrough inspections within 7 days. So now it says here that it's very clear that insured inspectors can go through that. Boilerplate language, it's in there. Now, WDI. Okay, Termite Company must be licensed. Probably not really that much of an issue. I don't know of any that aren't, but the contract does specifically state now that it must be a licensed pest control firm. The seller will provide buyer, broker, and any representatives of the licensed pest control firm reasonable access to the property to perform inspections, treatments, and/or repair. And unless the parties agree otherwise in writing, all repairs are performed by a contractor licensed to do the type of work performed. So we're saying that must be licensed. We're going to allow reasonable access to those parties, and you can't have your plumber do repairs on structural issues. They must be a licensed contractor to do that type of work. Previously in paragraph 15, we talked, it was buyer will or will not occupy the property as a buyer's principal residence unless specified in a written contingency. Neither this contract nor the financing is dependent or contingent on the sale or settlement of a lease or other property. This was added so that it's very clear, hey, unless it's specified somewhere else, there's no home sale contingency. If you are going to have a home sale contingency, you must execute the proper addendum, which in most cases would be the 4-page contingency clauses addendum that there is a contingency. This specifically lays out that there is not a home sale contingency unless there is a specific addendum. Major clarification in EMD. So prior to the new contract, it was a little ambiguous as to what the parties' positions were if the EMD was not delivered in a timely manner and or per the contract. Now, if the buyer fails to timely deliver the deposit to the escrow agent as provided, seller may at seller's option void the contract. Okay, so if it's supposed to be in there by Thursday before the contract and on Friday it's not there, seller can void. Okay, seller can say, we're done with you, I'm moving on, have a nice day. Now, prior to the seller voiding that, if they were still late and the seller hadn't voided, the buyer can cure that default by delivering the deposit. So delivery of EMD is most likely, that I can tell from reading the DPOR reports, the most violated rule, law, code in Virginia at DPOR. So it's very important to make sure that you have a system to keep your business safe, to keep the contract safe, and to protect your client. You ratify a contract, you immediately get that EMD deposited. And fortunately now, through technology, we have many ways to do that. Most title companies have an EMD mobile deposit platform. Many brokerages do, but it's important to get that done right away and to have evidence of that. And what's beautiful about the mobile deposit, and for instance, there's one called Zocca. Many of you may have seen that. And it's simply a mobile deposit platform, almost exactly the same as you would use to mobile deposit a check. So you can do it for your client, they can do it. And what this does is securely delivers the funds to the escrow agent, and it immediately provides you a receipt that it's been deposited, which is important if the listing agent asks for, I want proof that it was deposited. Well, prior to this, you had to either A, send them a check, which really doesn't prove anything, and really violates your responsibility of confidentiality to your client, because now you're giving out routing numbers and personal information about a client. This receipt, all it says is this person deposited this amount with this escrow agent on this date. And you can give that receipt to anybody. So as a good buyer's agent, developing that open communication with your listing agent, you deposit that, and then you just shoot that receipt right over to the listing agent. Now you've eliminated any conversation about the EMD, and everybody knows what's going on. But the important thing is, if it's not delivered per the contract, the seller can now void. Clarification of seller signing, and I believe this is one of the most important changes. So, a couple of things. In Virginia, the buyer's title company is the sole agent responsible for conducting the settlement. So we do split settlements in Virginia. The seller uses a title company and the buyer uses a title company, and that's fine. But we have to remember the seller's title company, while providing wonderful service, is really just moving paper around. They're not really conducting the settlement. The buyer's agent, the buyer's title company is the sole agent and is executing the closing. Now, for closing to happen, remember that the documents, the deed, must be delivered by the seller to the buyer on the day of settlement. Okay, so seller is closing at title company A, buyer is closing at title company B. If seller waits till the day of closing to go in and sign at their title company, it's difficult for the seller's title company to have that deed delivered over to the buyer's title company on the day of settlement. So now we have potentially the seller being in default because the deed has not been delivered. So the best practice would be, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, the title company is going to be contacting you. They're going to work out, and we're going to have you go in and sign your paperwork 2, 3, 4, whatever days earlier. They can sign very much a lot earlier than the buyer. The buyer has to sign on the day of settlement because the loan docs are dated. Seller can sign early. That gives the title company that is assisting the seller time to have that deed and funds delivered over to the buyer's title company so that the seller is not in default. So again, best practice, have your seller sign early. Don't wait till the day of settlement and risk having them be in default for non-delivery. I get 8 questions. Let's jump back. Please type in the name of the delivery system. It is called Zoccam, Z-O-C-C-A-M. Yeah, Andy, it is a great, easy to use program. I'm sure there's many of them out there. That's the one I can remember the name of, but many title companies have various, and brokerages have various programs to do that. But again, it is very easy to use. And yeah, EarnNest is another great one too. There's tons of them, but any of these, you can do it for your client or they can do it. But the key is, if your client does it, make sure that you're getting that receipt. If they put your information in, you're probably going to get that receipt. But if they mess up your email address or something like that, you might not get your receipt there. So somebody asked a question about, does this allow for multiple final walkthrough inspections? Yes. As you'll know, it says inspection or inspections, or it says inspections with the S in parentheses. There is an option for inspection or inspections up to 7 days prior to closing. And honestly, as a buyer's agent, I think the best practice is for a buyer's agent to do a pre-walkthrough inspection. So I would call up Michelle and I would say, hey, Michelle, really looking forward to closing on Friday. By the way, I'm going to do a quick agent walkthrough on Monday, 10 minutes. Just kind of put my buyer's mind at ease. I walk through the property. I make sure, hey, those repairs are done. Hey, that's the same refrigerator, blah, 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 blah. So that when I do my final walkthrough with my buyer there, I've eliminated the possibility for surprises. Because our goal with every buyer is to what? Get 10 referrals, right? But if I do everything right, and then I go through walkthrough at 10 o'clock for a 12 o'clock closing and there's problems, I can point fingers all day long, but guess what? I got a problem. But if I've checked everything before and made sure, hey, I've got those receipts, those repairs are done. So when the buyer walks through, no fuss, no muss, everybody's happy. It also took out the recitation of statute and timelines when the buyer can terminate contract if they did not receive disclosure statement, because that is in that's statutory. So remember that if you ratify a contract absent the D4 property disclosure, the contract's still ratified, okay? But the seller is now in a very precarious position. The contract's ratified absent that disclosure form executed. And remember, the seller has to sign first. It always makes me crazy when the buyer's agent has the buyer sign a blank one and send it over. Buyer can't sign first. Seller must sign first. If it's not executed at ratification, the buyer now has that get out of jail free card. They can walk away at any time. Once it's delivered post ratification, the buyer now has 3 days to walk away. So again, imagine having to call your seller and say, yeah, the buyer's walking because I didn't pay attention to the contract. I didn't execute that disclosure form, and they're getting out of the contract. So very important there. Please upload an MLS docs. Thank you, LT. Yes, MLS docs is the greatest, one of the greatest things that the MLS came up with. So when you put a listing in the computer in the MLS, upload docs to the MLS section. You can put almost anything in there. You can put a list of seller improvements. You should always put the property disclosure and any other disclosures that are applicable. Lead-based paint, meth lab, flood zone, whatever you're thinking you need to disclose there, it's important to have there. Be the agent that provides the experience for the buyer's agent that makes them want to work with you again, and be the agent that protects your client by providing those documents so that you don't have to scramble around on a Saturday trying to get it over to every agent that wants to write an offer. Possession date. We added mailbox keys, if any, as the means of access conveyed at settlement. So this is an area that I see often comes up after settlement when it comes to mailbox keys and smart devices. So, we go to closing and then your client's calling up and saying, I don't have the key fob, I don't have the mailbox keys, I don't have the codes. So be the agent that has that conversation with your seller. Okay, here's my checklist. In your home, you have this, 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 and this. What procedure? Here's the procedure we're going to use to make sure we deliver this to the buyer at settlement. Now we jump to smart devices. And I guarantee that there's many of you out there that have had a buyer call you a week after settlement and say, my Google Home or my Apple Smart device on the front door, I can't get into it because the seller's account is still attached to it. And then you've got to go to the listing agent who's got to call the seller that's probably moved to France and they've moved on from this transaction, and you've got to try and get them to deactivate their account. So as a listing agent, you want to have that conversation with your seller. Okay, you have smart devices in this home. We need to make sure that on the day of settlement, you have terminated your account so that the buyer now has access, because these installed smart devices convey unless otherwise noted. And again, smart home devices installed, hardwired, or attached convey unless otherwise agreed to. So we defined smart devices as switches, thermostats, doorbells, security cameras. Smart devices do convey unless otherwise agreed to. So when I teach pre-licensing, or I talk to new people wanting to get into real estate, and I talk about what it's like to be a realtor, one of the things I talk about is our real job now as realtors has transitioned from just helping people find homes. They find them on the internet and then we help them and stuff like that. It's really contract to close, where we're guiding them and protecting them from contract to close to make sure that they are conducting themselves within the spirit of the contract. And this is a prime area where realtors have the opportunity to bring real value to the table. I can tell you right now that a FSBO is going to mess all this up. Okay, so it is really important that we become experts at details, having a checklist, making sure we're protecting our seller and our buyers. Ring doorbells are notoriously difficult. You're exactly right, Ray, because the seller has moved on from the transaction and now you're trying to go back to the listing agent and get them to contact the seller, and the seller's like, I'm not emotionally attached to this house. I don't care anymore. So you're exactly right. It is a very difficult thing to deal with after the transaction. So in paragraph 13, personal property and fixtures, a change here is we took away the no box. Okay. And I think this was a good one. The no box just kind of, okay, if there's a yes box and a no box and nothing was checked, what did we mean? Well, now either the yes box is checked and it conveys, or the yes box is not checked and it doesn't convey. Very clear, okay? And as always, we have the the place where you can put in number of items. You know, this is important. If there's an extra refrigerator in the garage and it's just checked refrigerators, what are we talking about? Do both convey, or is it just the one in the kitchen, or God forbid, is it just the one in the garage? Again, contract to close. That is where our expertise really comes in protecting our clients. In the title paragraph, we fixed time for buyer to order the title and survey. So there was, again, ambiguity in this contract, okay? Title report and survey, if required, be ordered promptly, and if not available, settlement may be delayed up to 10 business days. Yeah, that was ambiguous at best, so that was removed. It just says buyer will promptly order title report as well as any required or desired survey. None of this automatic, because delayed up to 10 days, okay, not available. What does that mean? Does that mean they can't find it? Does that mean it's not clear? Does that mean it snowed on Sunday and Monday like it's supposed to and the courthouse was closed for a week? I don't know what that means, okay? So it was taken out. Buyer will order it, and they have a certain amount of time to get to closing, and there's no automatic 10-day extension. Paragraph 20, title. Buyer will convey target title that is good and marketable and insurable with no additional risk premium to buyer or with any non-standard exceptions. So one of the challenges that I saw occasionally was, you know, we got a buyer and a seller, and the title company for the buyer, the only title company, is saying, we can't insure this because of some exception or whatever, so we can't close. It's conveyed to the listing side, and the seller says, well, no, I'm not playing that game. My title company will insure it, so they can either close or not. Well, now it says very clearly that there's no additional risk premium or non-standard exceptions. It's saying that we're going to deliver the deed and ownership as defined in the contract, period. And there can't be any extra charge, or there can't be any non-standard exceptions. Prohibits the seller from unilaterally also recording an easement, covenant, or other restriction between contract and settlement. Clears that up quite a bit. Paragraph 26 was significantly reduced. Again, one of my favorite words when it comes to contract. It also took out a bunch of stuff that was inherently negotiable, such as removing the confusing section regarding whether brokerages can elect to accept half the EMD. So there was a paragraph in the contract prior that said the brokerage can elect to accept half the EMD in exchange for a release. Well, they can do that anyway. There's no reason to have that in the contract. And it just created ambiguity and opportunities for conversation. So it was just taken out. Time is of the essence. So paragraph 30 says time is of the essence. And remember what that means is, it doesn't mean hurry up, except that it does. It means that there are dates and timeframes in this contract that the parties have agreed to and must be met. Failure to meet stated dates or timeframes will, or may, most likely will, result in waiver of contractual rights or will be in default under the terms of contract. Okay, so home inspection, contingency financing, all those timeframes, time is of the essence in the legal sense means, hey, we're agreeing that these timeframes matter, and 10 days doesn't mean 11 days. And then they took out the highlighted parts because it talked about an automatic extension due to Truth in Lending Act or RESPA. They took that out because it just wasn't happening. You know, for the most part, everything has worked really smoothly with getting closing documents 3 days prior to closing. Either, you know, your lender can perform or they can't. We haven't had any issues where a lender or a title company has said, due to the integrated disclosure rule, we're having to delay the contract. It's usually a contractual issue, not a statutory rule that's delaying the contract. Other provisions, paragraph 41, removed. Okay. It was removed because it encourages realtors to practice law by drafting language beyond the templates and clauses provided. So remember, when we say we're going to write a contract, we're really filling out a contract. And remember that anything we write into a contract overrules anything pre-printed. So other terms was just that place where people could get themselves in trouble. The biggest one I always saw again was home inspection for informational purposes only. What does that mean? That could mean anything. So it's been taken out, and now we've taken out the opportunity for other things like offer void by 5 p.m. on 12/31. Okay, what year? Okay, see what I'm saying? Ambiguity in contracts leads to chaos and anarchy. So this has been taken out. If you have something that you want to add into a contract, it should be done on an addendum. And if you handwrite it, be very careful. Be very, very clear about what you're writing. I'm going to jump back to questions here for a second. Love this change. Thank you, Megan. Thank you, Beth. Melanie Thompson, lenders discussion per committee. I love that. Who determines what a non-standard exception is? I would say, yes, Sandy, it'd be the title company, because it would be the title insurance that would decide if it is a standard exception or a non-standard exception. C. Lynn Linehan wanted a line that allowed the seller to identify the name of the company that were representing the seller at settlement. I agree, Sandy, and I have wanted that too. The challenge with that is, I believe, is that this is statutory. Remember that in Virginia, the buyer has the absolute right to choose a title company, okay? It can't be taken away from them, and they can't give it up. So that's absolute. And remember, we refer back to the beginning of this class where it said there really is only one title company for the contract. It is the buyer's title company. So if we add that line that the seller will be represented by such and such, we are potentially, I believe, in conflict with the statute that says there's only one title company and it's the buyers, and they have the absolute right. So I believe, I don't know, Melanie, you may be able to answer that better. I don't know, but I believe that's why it's not been added in. You can't really add in a second title company when there is only one for the transaction.
So that's a great discussion, but I would say that by practice, agents do that, but please clarify who's representing the buyer side and the seller side, because I know you guys do it so that when you ship that thing right off to the settlement company, they know who's on the other side to contact. So I know that's what you're doing it for, but please clarify.
And I think it's a great point, Mel. And so what I always did when I was, on the street listing and selling, when I ratified a contract, I don't care which side I was on. I had a cover sheet. And that cover sheet listed who both agents were, the name of the buyer and the seller, property address, who the lender was, and who the buyer's title company was, and who the seller had elected to use to manage their paperwork. And then all the contact information. And then I sent that to everybody involved in the contract. Okay. So there was no question that I had made sure that everybody working on the contract had a copy of it, had the cover sheet, and had the contact information for everybody involved. And then I was covered. Yeah, I know, Suzanne, but I don't think they're going to do it. The right to sell listing agreement. The changes were modified to be consistent with the conveyances. Again, we just removed those no check boxes. It's either yes, we have it, or the box isn't checked and it's not there. Again, when we had a yes and a no box and neither box was checked, well, did somebody forget to check a box or what? Now it's clear. Either the yes box is checked or it's not, and it doesn't convey. I did have some questions, though, that the paragraph 41 in the sales contract, there still is an other term section in the listing agreement if you need to add anything, because that's really an internal agreement between the brokerage and the seller. So that's not as important as having it removed from the sales contract. So it's still in the listing agreement. There's two new forms out there. Optional listing information sheet. Okay. It has been modified, again, consistent with the changes in formatting the conveyances. There's lots of good feedback on this form. Somebody a little while ago mentioned, and I thank you who you were, but I can't remember your name right now without looking, but please upload to the MLS document section. Yes, this is excellent. This is an excellent tool to provide value, enhance your reputation as a realtor. When you fill out a listing agreement, complete this optional listing information sheet, upload it to the MLS doc section. So when I'm writing a contract on a Saturday, I can print this out and go, wow, here's all this information in a boilerplate for rewriting an offer. And wow, I've got all this information in front of me and it's great. Another new form that I talked about a minute ago, sort of, is an optional buyer offer cover sheet. So I know when I was listing and selling and I had to send over an offer to a buyer, you always send them the complete offer, but it's easy for us to think, oh, well, I read the contract, so they must be able to read the contract. Well, I got to tell you, if you're a civilian and not used to reading these contracts, it can be daunting. It can be arduous. I feel like I got a thesaurus out this morning, but this is a great form to add with your offer to send over the listing agent to say, hey, here's my complete offer, but here's also a cover sheet that says these are the bullet points so that you can use this to compare offers. And, I look at it this way. In an era of multiple offers, which, are we still in, are we still not? But we were, okay? If I submit a really clean and concise offer that makes it really easy for the listing agent and the seller to review, okay? I'm not saying they're going to take my offer because it looks better, but I'm going to tell you their mind's going to drift back to that offer more often than the offer that comes over that is incomplete, sloppily filled out, handwritten in cursive. Oh my God. You writing offers in cursive, whoever you are, please stop immediately. Okay, just stop. So this cover sheet is just an option that clarifies what you're sending over and just makes it easier for everybody to review. It also provides a way for the cooperating agent, the buyer's agent, to request that the listing agent confirm in writing that the offer has been presented or seller has waived presentment in accordance with the Code of Ethics. So Code of Ethics says we must present any and all offers up through closing unless the seller has waived it. If the seller says, look, I don't want to see any offers under 320, don't send them to me. That's your right. That's your right as a citizen in a semi-free country. But you better have that in writing because otherwise you are bound to deliver that and you can ask for confirmation that the offer has been presented. Unimproved land, again, updates were consistent with the applicable changes to the residential sales contract, mostly boilerplate stuff. And wow, that's it. Let me look at listing info sheet was one of the most helpful things implemented. Thank you, C. Lynn Linehan. Yes, I believe that there are lots of tools out there and, it's easy to get overwhelmed sometimes with the number of tools that we have out there available to us. But that is a really good one. That is correct. And it's important to use tools that can enhance the opportunities for your offer to be selected over someone else's offer and to enhance the opportunity to enhance your reputation with your fellow realtors. Every time you deal with a fellow realtor, your reputation is on the line, and anything you can do to get that realtor to say, I'm saving your number in my phone because I want to do business with you again. It enhances your position in multiple offers or getting information from the listing agent. They want to work with you because they know you're a professional and they know it's more than likely going to be a smooth ride. A lot of agents still don't review the documents and or actually use them. Yes, that is a problem. That is a problem. And, I think I teach a lot of pre-licensing and I teach a lot of continuing education. One of the problems in our industry is a lot of agents seem to think, well, I took that class, I don't need to take it again. Well, there's a problem with that. And the best analogy I can come up with is, I'm going to go with Barbara Castillo. What's your favorite song?
U2, Streets Have No Name?
Do you know all the words to it?
Yes.
Did you know all the words to it the very first time you heard it?
No, but
No.
I certainly wanted to.
Right. There you go. That's real estate education. You don't take a contract class one time and know it all. I've been teaching for, I don't know, 10, 15 years, whatever now. I still, when I see Freemeyer's teaching a class or another one of our fine instructors, I still take the class because I still pick stuff up. You don't learn it the first time. And that speaks back to, whose comment there? Michelle Wilson. A lot of agents still don't view the documents because a lot of agents think they took the class one time and don't have to take it again. Ray Nelson, multiple offer situations by having clean docs and good communication. Yeah, exactly. And every time you do that, you're enhancing your reputation. Wallet Keys phone, got to listen to Susie Stone. Add into the agent remarks for agents to use the seller info sheet provided. Great. Make it easy for other agents. Lynn Lenahan mentioned that too. Add instructions everywhere. Instructions everywhere. It's going to make everybody's life easier. And we are an industry of friendly competitors. So it's important that we work together for the betterment of our industry to protect our clients. And when we're working together, everybody wins. Any questions? Can anybody tell I've had 2 coffees this morning? Fired up. I love contract changes. All right, Barb, nobody's asking any questions. So,
Wow. So what would you say the 2 biggest takeaways are? Because I've sat through this class 3 times. To me, it's the seller signing their stuff ahead of time.
I would agree.
And knowing if they don't ask for an inspection, they can't just show up with one.
I would say those are definitely 2 of the biggest ones. Yeah, you got to have your seller sign early. You got to do it. Otherwise, they risk being in default by not performing, by not delivering the deed on the day of closing. And I'm very glad we clarified this. Hey, you waived your home inspection. No, you just can't bring a home inspector into that house. I mean, there's all kinds of discussions. We could have an hour-long discussion about the problem of inspectors coming into your home when it hasn't been agreed to by the parties. So I would say those are the 2 biggest changes.